What's up guys, Nick over here at Mile NYC. We got another video for you. Today what we're gonna be doing is going over wear and tear, visual tips and tricks that you can do and check on your bike to make sure that your bike lasts as long as you can and really stretch out the life expectancy of it. It's gonna be a super simple video. We have a lot of things that you can keep an eye on. That way you as a rider know what your bike is really doing and telling you what it needs. First point we're going to look at is your brakes. Now your brakes are arguably the most important thing on your bike. Huge safety concern if your brakes are not working well. General rule of thumb, 500 to 750 miles. You're probably going to change your brake pads around there. Obviously if you're super aggressive of a rider, you might change them sooner. If you're not that aggressive of a rider, if you're not slamming on your brakes that often, you probably can get a little bit more than that as far as miles goes. Visually, you can look at the brake pad. You can look to see if your brakes, the actual pad itself is low. You can look to see if your pistons are popping out a little bit. Another thing to keep an eye on is the sound of your brakes. If it sounds like metal on metal, if it sounds like scraping every time the wheel spins, if it sounds like super loud squeaking when you hit your brakes, that might be an indication that it's a good time to change your brake pads. Another thing to look at is going to be if you're hitting your brakes and they aren't as stiff as they used to be, or the travel, you're pulling your brake lever and it goes further down. That's going to be something to take a look at too. All of those things, if you start to hear them, or if you start to hear a combination of those things, it's not a bad thing to just pop your brakes off and take a look at it. If you don't take care of your brake pads and you let them run out and you grind them down all the way to the metal, you could damage other components of the bike, which will cost you a lot more money. So basically, if you run your pads all the way down to metal, you could damage your rotor. That would be another thing that you need to swap out. If you run your brake pads all the way down and you damage your piston or something like that, you could actually have to change your entire brake assembly, which is more time, more money, more parts, more of a headache, stuff like that you have to do. So keeping up with your brake pads can save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and it keeps you as safe as possible when you're stopping. So it's always good to keep an eye on that. Point number 2 is going to be your tires. Now, tires are going to be very similar to a car tire. A couple of things to look out for are going to be cracks, your tread. If you have big knobby tires like this, it's going to be a little bit easier to take a look at the treads because they're these big knobs. So if you see it start to wear or shave down or flatten out in certain spots, it might be a good idea to take a look at getting a new tire. Another point to take a look at is going to be your bead of the tire. It's this line that runs along the entire outside of this tire right here. So if you start to have any fraying, any ripping, anything like that on the outside of this tire, it's a good idea to get a new tire. If you get a flat at any point and you have a pretty big puncture in your tire, depending on the size of the puncture, it might be a good idea to get a new tire as well. One of the most common questions we get is, what should I be running my tires at? General rule is probably going to be 22 to 25 PSI. Now, if you want to run it a little bit firmer because you like the ride, you can do that. If you want to run it a little bit softer to get a little bit softer of a ride, you can do that as well. Just as long as you don't exceed what's on the sidewall, which is 36 PSI, you should be fine. But it's something to keep an eye on, and I would probably take a look at that every 2-3 weeks just to make sure you don't have a slow leak, or make sure your ride is as consistent as possible. All right guys, point number 3 is going to be your electronics. Now the biggest things here, make sure everything's fully seated, there's no loose connections, and number 2 is going to be make sure there's no damage to your wires. So this is really straightforward. I wouldn't go too in-depth with this. Trace all your wires, make sure all these connections are good to go. On pinching points like right here, make sure nothing's damaged. All this stuff up here is going to be your electronics, your throttle, your brake cutouts, all that stuff is going to be up here. Your really important electronics are going to be under the seat. So there's a little plastic zip tied piece. Take that off, and everything down here, just make sure it's fully seated. Make sure it's plugged in, make sure there's no damage, twists, or anything crazy. If you have cutouts, something's not working right, your bike's throttle's not working, anything like that, check your connections, make sure everything's fully seated, and make sure you're not finding any damage, because a lot of the times we see bikes cutting in and out, it's the electronics. So just do a quick little once over on your wires. I wouldn't do it more than once a month, something like that, unless you have an issue that you're trying to find out what it is. All right guys, point number 4 is going to be general upkeep of the bike. So the biggest thing I can stress here is these bikes are not waterproof. Don't take a hose to them. If it's pouring rain outside, don't ride them. But if you do get caught in some rain, if you get caught in some snow, if you're riding through and there's a bunch of salt or something on the ground, nice practice to do is when you get home, just wipe it down. Wipe down the bike. If you do get your bike super dirty and you need to wash it, don't take a hose to it. Get some generic bike wash, get some soap and some water, just spray down the bike and wipe it down with some towels. Super, super simple. You don't have to go over the top with it. If you do get caught in some rain or something like that, pat the bike dry, keep it as dry as you can. Your electronics will last longer. Your bike parts will last longer. It's also a good rule to just have some normal bike lube. Lube up your chain, lube up your normal bike components. It's just a good practice to do, and it'll really stretch out your life. If you let stuff sit on the bike, water or anything like that, you'll get a lot of rusting going on. Your bolts will rust. It'll be really hard to remove those, or your chain will rust. It'll be really hard for the chain to perform like it's supposed to. So, you know, don't get caught in rain. Don't wash it with a hose, and just ultimately just wipe it down and keep on top of it. Step number 5 is going to be our final step, and that's going to have to do with your battery. Now, if you are somebody who stores it over the winter, if you're going to go out of town or something like that and you don't know how to store your bike or your battery, the bike you can store however you want. You can leave it outside in a garage. In the winter, you can leave it wherever you need to leave it, that's fine. The biggest thing is going to be your battery. Now your battery, what I would do is charge it up to 90%, take it off the bike and leave it inside and just let it do its thing. What I would not do, which is very important, is do not leave your battery super dead and then just leave it there over the winter, or don't leave it charging over the winter, or leave it while you're out of town or anything like that. The battery is very, very important for the bike. It's the most expensive thing on the bike. So don't leave it charging, don't leave it super dead, because a lot of people come back from their trip or back from winter and say, hey, I'm gonna ride my bike. If it's super dead, you could damage your battery and you might have to get a new battery. So charge it up to 90%, leave it inside, you'll be fine, it's not a big deal. But other than that, you could do a lot with this battery. I wouldn't stress it too much. So Last Mile has 3 locations. We have 2 in California, 1 in New York City. We are all authorized dealers and authorized service centers for the vehicles. If you have any questions, you can give all of us a call. We'll more than happy to answer your questions. We usually recommend doing a tune-up, a cleaning, something like that once a year, maybe twice a year, depending on how you ride. But if you're in the area of any of our locations, swing by, check out the shop, give us a call, we'll be here. All right guys, that's it for this video. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you use some of these tips on your own bike. If you have any questions, leave us a comment, give us a call, hit us up on Instagram, anything like that. Like the video, let us know what videos you'd like to see, whether it's maintenance stuff, whether it's product stuff, anything like that, just let us know and we'll be happy to hit you guys back up. Thanks for watching and we'll see you on the next one.